Hey guys, thanks for watching this sermon, listening to this sermon. We're so excited that you were part of the Village Church, larger family all over the world. 100 countries listening, watching these sermons, thousands of people. We're so excited that you're downloading this content, but we actually want you to be part of this church, part of this movement across the world. So please go online, look at ways you can get involved in community groups. They're in a ton of cities all over the world. We're doing Zoom stuff right now, obviously during COVID. And then give. This is villagechurch.com/give. You can give as it takes a ton of money, resources to be able to pull off what we do week in and week out across all of our ministries that we do. Kids ministry, women's ministry, community groups, children's stuff, sermon stuff, music stuff, everything that we're doing, counseling all over the world. And so we'd love you to be a part of that. And also sign up for our newsletter because that tells you what's going on. This is villagechurch.com/newsletter so that you can know what's actually happening. So hopefully you're enjoying watching these, listening to these sermons. Hopefully they're super helpful to you and bless you, and share them with a friend, with a family member so people can come to know Jesus. That's why we exist. That's what we're all about. Thanks guys. God bless you this week. So what do you believe about humankind, about God, about salvation itself, about heaven, about hell? These are puzzles that we as a human species have been trying to figure out for tens of thousands of years. Since we were drawing on walls, we have come up with every concept under the sun to explain who we are, where we are, what the problem is, and what the solution is. That's what sociologists like Brian Walsh and others tell us are the four basic questions that we ask as cultures in general. Our identity, our environment, our plight, and the solution to our plight. So we've been coming up with different ways to solve that problem. And one of the big things is we've done religion. We've thought through every possible version of chanting and sacrifice and things that we do to try to please the gods so that when we die, we can go to heaven, and when we live, we can have life and meaning and purpose. All these things are our best effort. And then 2,000 years ago, Christianity enters the conversation and it says something different. It says what we talked about last week and what we'll continue to talk about this week, the most known passage in the Bible, the most popular, the one at the football games. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whoever believes in him, I love how gracious, whoever, doesn't matter who you are and how much money you have and what race you are, and whoever believes in him. That's the doctrine of justification by faith that the church has always believed, that the way you get saved in the end is by your faith in the finished work of the Son, Jesus, on the cross and in the resurrection for you versus what you could do. There's a great question I read this week from Charles Spurgeon, who said, if you could save yourself, then why did Jesus have to die? That's the question of John 3:16. He wouldn't have had to suffer and die and come down if you could save yourself. If the gods could ever say, okay, fine, you're good based on what you've done. And the problem we have is that the God of the universe is saying, I'm perfect, and there's no way you can be in my presence without being perfect. We sinned in the garden, so what had to happen? A perfect sacrifice had to go in our place and then get accredited to us, as Paul unpacks in Romans 4. So it's those who believe in him, who put their faith, their relational trust in him. And some of you maybe have done that in your life or last week, or maybe now you need to say, I need to believe in Jesus versus myself, in him versus me. See, we tend to trust in beauty and success and whatever it is that we trust in. And it says, no, the only hope is that you trust in him and you should not perish. I'm going to talk more about that today, but have eternal life. That's the beautiful other side. Now we're on verse 17. And verse 17 says this, for God did not send his son. Now, here's the shift that now takes place. He said the word gave turns into send. Now this becomes kind of the main verb that Jesus' mission, and 39 times John is going to talk about Jesus as the one sent from the Father. This becomes the main picture of who Jesus is from John. It's his favorite picture, that Jesus is not only the one given, but the one sent. And ascending, it's the Greek word apostolos, where we get apostle. It's sent one. And you and I are small a apostles in the sense that we're all sent. And I want you to feel that today. The not only being saved, verse 16, but the being sent, verse 17. Is that your life? Like, do you actually use your money and time and house and car and resources to be a sent one? Like, is anyone coming to Jesus because of you? That's the question. We as a church have always kind of been wanting to be sent ones. Like, we've always kind of gone, yes, let's do discipleship. Let's talk to the church. But let's talk to the people who aren't in the church yet. That's the thing that bothers me, is people go, oh, well, you've got, a church of people to love and serve. And I'm like, yeah, totally. But then there's all the people that I drive by on my way home from the office every week that aren't saved yet, that aren't a part of Village Church yet, or any church. And those are the people that keep me awake at night. And maybe it's because the house I grew up in and the family I come from, whatever. But it's like, man, I want people to come to know Jesus because, my dad passed away when he was 47, didn't know Jesus. So many people, family, friends of mine passed away without knowing Christ. And I just say to myself, man, my life has to be spent on reaching the people who aren't here yet. And so to the chagrin of some, I know that I'm not always the best pastor. And as I wrestle with what that means, we make sure that we staff a lot of great pastors to love and serve you well, because I'm probably a bit more of an evangelist, a sent one. And me and my family try to kind of orient our life around being sent one. Even at Village, when we started, I remember we started kind of growing and we were in this little elementary school gym. And I've told this story, a few times, but when we started, it was 50 people. And then we started growing and people are coming to know Jesus and inviting their friends and family. And then we're like 300 people maxed out in this gym, and we have to make the scary call to go to 2 services. And it was like, 2 services. And I remember a woman coming up to me saying, if we go to 2 services, it's going to kill the church, because the church is all about community. And so if we go to 2 services, I remember her saying, this is going to be the nail in our coffin. And I was like, nail in our coffin? And then the next week I got up and I looked at the church and I said, listen, we didn't start a church. I don't work 80 hours a week, slaving away to love and serve people and teach the Bible the best I can to reach your friends and family so that you can just sit around and have more friends. It's so that people don't die and go to hell on my watch. And so we're going to go to 2 services. And if you don't like that, you can go to another church. If you like, there's lots of churches around. And I remember the next week we went to 2 services, and I said, we're going to 2 services next week. Let's go. And we grew by 50 people just by going to 49 people because she left, but 49 people in 1 week just by going to 2 services, because we're sent ones in the end, guys. We're not just settlers. We're pioneers meant to use our money and our time and our innovation in our lives to be sent. Do you have any sentness about you? Or do you just worry about getting a good job and raising a good family, getting your square footage, figuring out the car scenario, figuring out your reputation in your little town or your city or whatever, or being smart or being beautiful or being critical or being funny? Is it all driven through with a sentness or not? That's the question. Has anyone been led to has anyone come to know Jesus because of you recently or in your life ever? The Son, the one you're trying to be like, is by definition a sent one. When we do baptisms, and we did these beautiful baptisms a few weeks ago, we showed you on Easter, 42 people baptized in the water. I always celebrate, and then I want to look to you, the beautiful church of Jesus, the people who call Village Church home across the provinces and cities, across the world, wherever, and say, how many people were baptized a month ago because of you? That's what a sent one does. They use their life not just to hunker down, but to be a person who actually tells the world and brings the world into a relationship with who? With the Son, his Son into the world, Jesus. Now, that's the topic, right? That's the issue, the Son of God, Jesus himself, not your political ideology. What do you lead with? What are you most jacked up about right now? Converting people to your view on vaccines? Converting people to your political ideology? Converting people to your fill in the blank? Or the Son? That's the issue. Are people giving their life to Jesus, not your political view or those become distractions. And then he says this, for God did not send his Son, Jesus, to the world. That's the Greek word cosmos. It's the same word that he used up here. And understand, and this is beautiful, the world isn't in John's language. He uses it constantly. It's not God's friend yet. And that's the beautiful thing. He says he did not come to condemn the world. So we got to look at this word condemn for a second. The Son of God did not come to condemn the world. So let's think about this. Here's the scandal that the reason he didn't come to condemn the world is because he didn't need to condemn the world because the world, now, you know that I critique conservative theology and ideology a lot, all right? Every time I'm saying, religion can't save you, and your being a good family person can't save you, and being a good person can't save you. I'm critiquing kind of that conservative ideology. So let me just critique for a quick second liberal ideology, because liberal ideology wants to tell you that humankind is basically good, and that what we need to do to save ourselves is do more education, more politics, more whatever, but we're basically a good group of people just trying to make the world a little better. And the problem with that is what he just said is he didn't come to condemn the world because he didn't need to, because the world, hear this now, isn't in a neutral position theologically. It starts out since Genesis 3 as already condemned. Let that blow your mind for a second. The reason Jesus Christ didn't have to come and condemn the world is because the world is already, it's the doctrine of what's called human depravity. Humankind is already broken. Notice Jesus Christ doesn't start where Adam began. He starts, in a sense, he comes into a world that starts where Adam ended. And if there's a Christian doctrine that can be proved more easily than this, I don't know it. Humankind is depraved, messed up, sinful. And if you doubt it, just read the news every day. The murder, the rape, the strife, the war, the power, the absolute narcissism of every human being that walks the earth is human depravity. As one writer has said, history is just a conveyor belt of corpses. It's a little negative of view, but the point is, humankind is condemned. It's in a position of condemned already. And so this is the incredible point. This is what blows it up. He didn't come to condemn the world, it says, but in order that the world might be saved. There's the beautiful, hopeful words. God sends his son to save the world. That's the point. And this was different than every religious ideology of the time. A guy named Robert Wright wrote a book years ago called The Evolution of God. He's not a Christian. He's a secularist. And he says these words: we can be pretty sure, and this is for the skeptics out there, that the crucifixion of Jesus happened, in part because it made so little theological sense, he says. As the iconic Christian verse John 3:16 puts it, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And as powerfully as these words ring now, imagine their impact in the ancient world, Wright says. Throughout history, gods had been the beings to whom you made sacrifices. Now, here was a God that not only demanded no ritual sacrifice from you, but himself made sacrifices, indeed the ultimate sacrifice for you. Let that ring for you, that he gave his son, he sent his son in order that the world, again, his enemy, not, oh, I already love you, so you should save me. Paul says in Romans 5, we were enemies when Christ died for us, that the world might be saved through Jesus. It's an upside down, beautiful point of the gospel. I read a story as I was prepping this week of a kid and his dad. They were walking down a road during World War I. And of course, in World War I and World War II, when your child died in the war, you would put a star out in the window. And that star basically said, hey, I one of my sons died in the war. And they were walking by, and the kid looked up at this window and he said, what does that mean, that star in the window, Dad? And the dad said, well, it means that family sacrificed a son for our freedom. And then this little kid looked up, and in the evening, the sun was just going down, the evening star, that bright evening star was shining in the sky. And the kid looked up and he said, Man, that must mean that God, Daddy, God himself gave his son in the war too. And of course, that's the gospel reality, is that God gave his only son in the ultimate war against sin and death and evil. And that's his point here, so that we might be saved. Evil was defeated. God actually paid the price versus us paying the price. And so what I love about this is it flips the picture of what we think of God as angry, sitting up in heaven, mad all the time, just waiting to hit us with a lightning bolt and whatever. And I see that in sometimes my version of God, because I see it in myself. I don't know if you're like me, but sometimes my kids do something dumb or they sin against me. And I'm like, why'd you do that? And I put them in their room and whatever. And it's like, why do we look at the world? I look at people who make things on social media that tick me off. I mean, see staff member, whatever, and you're like, oh, why are those people so dumb? They should pay for what they've done. That tends to be how we function. And here's God in heaven with legitimately, his option could be, let's make them pay for what they've done. Let's be frustrated. I saw a guy, someone posted this week about a guy who on social media has been basically just saying COVID's a lie and I don't believe it and I don't care about it and we shouldn't pay attention to it and whatever. And this week he's actually on a ventilator and he's on the brink of death. And someone was sharing and saying, hey, just so you know, this guy had this big party to basically throw, just basically say, hey, COVID's a joke. I'm going to throw a super spreader party. Had one. Now he's on a ventilator. And people on social, see, right in that moment, as I share that with you, half of you feel this like, yeah, whatever. And then half of you are like, well, he kind of deserves it. That's kind of where we go in our brain. And what we tend to understand is that people should get what they deserve. And then God flips it all and goes, I'm not going to give you what you deserve. I'm going to make my son take what you deserve. And I'm going to give you what you don't deserve. This is the upside down concept of what the Christian history has called grace. Now, I'll give you a great example of this. If go in your Bible to Luke chapter 9, for a quick sec, listen to this crazy story in Luke 9. And I guarantee you maybe didn't read this in your morning devos. And I can almost guarantee you don't put this on the fridge. Luke chapter 9, verse 54, Jesus is walking around Samaria, who are the enemies of the Jews, of course. And verse 54 says, and when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? Okay, so he looks at the Samaritans, James and John, and they're like, we don't like these guys. Let's let fire come down and consume them. And verse 55 says, but he turned and rebuked them, and they went on to another village. Here's the beautiful thing. This comes from like the Old Testament, the days of Elijah. Elijah would throw fire down on people. The disciples who are following Jesus come to a place and a point in their life where they're like, you know what I want to do? I want to throw fire down on people who don't agree with me. You ever felt like that on social media when you're scrolling? I want to bring fire down on people who spread lies about me or say bad things about my family, whatever. I want fire to come down. I want them to get what they deserve. And Jesus goes, guys, I rebuke you. You don't understand. And then, just follow me for a second. In Luke 12, a few chapters later, here's a great verse. Here's what Jesus says in verse 49. I came to cast fire on the earth, and I wish that it were already kindled. I have come to undergo a baptism, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished. Now, think about this for a quick second. How great is my distress until it's accomplished. I've come to undergo a baptism of fire. This is Luke 12. Jesus has already been baptized in water. So what's he talking about? Here's what he means. Guys, the fire is not going to come down on them. It's going to come down on me. I am going to go and suffer on a cross. And you know this fire that you want to spit out on everybody? guess what? It's going to come down on me instead. It's not going to come down on them. And at the end of the day, the fire is going to drop on me on the cross. I am going to suffer for the sake of the world, so I don't have to, the world in the end doesn't have to be condemned. That's the whole point. And so he says, whoever believes in him is not condemned. You don't have to undergo the condemnation of God because Jesus took the fire for you. That's the point. And so you still have time. That's the great reality of this verse. Whoever believes in him, meaning Jesus, is not condemned. You and I, we still have time. It's an invitation to not be condemned. I'll talk about condemnation in a second, but just feel the beauty of it. Jesus didn't come to condemn the world, but to save it. Whoever believes in him doesn't need to be condemned. It's like in the law court image, you don't need to go to jail. You've sinned against the judge. You've sinned against God. The judge should just pound the gavel and put you away because every day you sin. Every day you do. You're materialistic, you're selfish, you're whatever. But you're in a law court and the lawyer gets you off the charge. And not only gets you off, he actually takes your place. The question becomes, what are you going to do with the freedom? You should go watch this. I was watching this documentary the other day. It's called Long Shot. It's on Netflix. And you should go watch it. It's this fascinating story about this guy in LA, and he's on this murder charge for murdering this girl. And he's got a daughter, and he's like, look, I didn't do it, but he was in the courtroom when I think it was his cousin was being tried for something, and this girl testified against his cousin. And then, of course, a few weeks later, this girl ends up murdered, and he lives within a few blocks of this girl and was actually in that area in the same day with his car. And basically all the evidence compiled against him and said, you are going to jail. And this guy was like, I didn't go to jail, or I didn't kill the girl. I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm going to jail. What's happening? And so he's like, I'm saying goodbye to my daughter and my wife, and I'm in prison, whatever. And so his lawyer starts to research the case and starts to realize this guy's actually not guilty. But he's going to go away and he's going to get the death penalty because he has no, he's got no good alibi. And then they looked at the date and they realized, wait a minute, on that date, you were actually at an LA Dodgers game. And if we could find the tickets that proved that you were at the LA Dodgers game, then you'd be set free. And so they're looking around the house, and finally they find these tickets to the LA Dodgers game under the couch, and they bring them and they say, look, it was me, it was my buddy, and it was my daughter. I went and picked up my buddy, my daughter, the three of us were at the LA Dodgers game, third baseline, 20 rows up. We were there, and that's where we were at the time of the murder, like 10 minutes before the murder. We're in the seats. We couldn't have been in that area. And of course, the lawyer goes, look, and then the court says, well, we have no proof that he was actually there. How are we going to prove that this guy was at the Dodgers Stadium at that particular time? He could have got the tickets ripped, left an hour early, and gone and killed this girl. And so they didn't have any evidence. And so the lawyer goes to Dodger Stadium and he asks the CEO, can I see the media book? Like, is there anybody doing anything in Dodger Stadium that day that I could get some evidence? And so they open up the media book, and the lawyer goes through the media book because oftentimes they'll shoot commercials or whatever. And so he goes through all these days, and that 5 days, 10 days before the day, it's blank page, nothing. And he flips to the day of the murder, and there's one shoot that happens to be happening at the time that the LA Dodgers are playing. And it's the HBO show, Curb Your Enthusiasm. Okay, so HBO has a thing in there, 9:00. We shot for 20 minutes. Now, of course, Curb Your Enthusiasm didn't want to pay to take over the entire Dodger Stadium. So what they did is during the game, they just came in and they shot down certain aisles and certain rows while the game was going. Really quick shoot, 15-minute shoot. And no joke, he gets the files from HBO and he starts sifting through the 6 camera angles, and they shot the scene, third baseline, row 4, And the guy and his daughter and his brother are in the shot. There's literally film footage of the crew that accidentally, they weren't supposed to, moved a barrier and let the guy and his daughter walk right in front of the camera down into their seats. And right there, during the time of the murder, this guy is being filmed by the HBO crew. What are the chances? 1 in a trillion that this guy gets on that video. And this saved my life. And he's crying, and Larry David's on camera. He's going, this is the crazy, I tell this story all the time. This is the craziest thing that's ever happened to me. It's crazy. Now listen, what are the chances? This guy gets off in the law court of life. The question is, what does he do with that freedom? Guys, you and I got a second chance at life because of Jesus Christ. And some of you are sitting there pondering your epistemological position on fill in the blank. Run with it. Jesus has offered you an invitation to be free. Whoever does not believe, whoever believes in him is not condemned. I want you to run. I want you to live. I want you to actually have life. He's not condemned. I didn't come to condemn the world, but to save it. Do you know how beautiful that is? That's a word to the culture war warriors out there. You know, you can't reach a world you don't love. How are you ever going to reach a world you don't even like? Your job is not to look at people and say, oh, I'm going to call, I got to make sure they sound Christian, look Christian, even if they don't know Jesus. No, your job is to make sure they don't end up in the category of condemned. And then verse 18 says, whoever believes in him, whoever does not believe in him is condemned already. I love that phrase. I'll come back to condemned in a second. They're condemned already. It's like you look at a masterpiece. If you don't like it, it ain't the masterpiece's problem. Right? I brought my kids down a few weeks ago. There was a Van Gogh exhibit. All right, down in Vancouver. So we go down and it's this fully immersive Van Gogh experience where it goes through his life and his depression and all his paintings and beautiful all around you. And my kids are like staring at their feet, kicking around going, this is fuzzy. And it's like, it's a masterpiece. In that moment, you think Van Gogh's condemned? No, my kids are condemned. People who look at me and say Manchester by the Sea is boring, you're condemned. Hey, what are you talking about? It's a masterpiece. What are you like, Fast and Furious, bro? Like, it's your fault. You're the one who's less. You're experiencing not the fullness. You're already condemned. If you look at the most beautiful act that has ever been done, the portrait, the great Mona Lisa, the cross, the resurrection, the Mona Lisa, of all things that you say, I don't like it, it's too small, or small. You're the one that has a problem. Not God. God has done what he's done. That's the point. They're condemned already. And you might not even know it, which we'll come back to in a second, which is the scary point. Now, let me hone in on this scary phrase, condemned. He says, there's a group that's not condemned, there's a group that gets condemned. Now, here's the definition of this word. And this for the next few minutes is not a fun thing to talk about, but it's something as a preacher and as a church we believe, and as a preacher, I feel like I need to communicate because the Bible communicates it pretty clearly. The definition of condemnation is this: it's pronounced guilty and sentenced to punishment. And the first thing to say is we believe in Jesus and you won't be condemned because he's not believed in the name of the only Son of God. That's what he's already said. It means if you don't believe in the only Son of God, you will be condemned. The opposite is true. That there is a condemnation and there's an eternal expression. There's a condemned alreadiness, but then there's an eternal expression of condemnation, which is you're still under the wrath of God. You're still in that natural state that the world was in, that the Son of Man didn't have to condemn the world because it was already condemned as a starting position, and you needed to be saved. Like what the beautiful point is, he saves some. He came into a position where it's not neutral, it's already done, and he saves. But then if you reject the Son, then you remain in that position. And that's the problem. The eternal expression of this is what Jesus calls hell. In the Gospels, he calls it Gehenna, Mark chapter 9 and other places. He uses a historic place called Gehenna, or which was a rubbish heap of Jerusalem, the garbage heap, which had constant burning and worms that never died, and so on and so, all these metaphors. And he uses that to say this will be the sole position, the sole state for eternity of everyone who's condemned. So skeptics push back against this condemnation and say, well, I don't really like it. And there's 3 or 4 different things that they push back and say, we don't like the doctrine of hell, so we're not going to believe it. So let me just go through a couple of those. The first one is that hell is repulsive. That's one of the skeptical objections to Christianity. And that position is basically, hell is repulsive. I don't like it. Now, what I would say about that is you have to be careful with that one, because that's not really a doubt. That's just a repulsion. Like, that's not saying I did some historical research or I did some philosophical or I looked up some archaeology and Jesus never spoke about hell. That's not the argument. It's that Jesus spoke about it, but I don't like it, so I'm going to remove it from my theology. And the problem with that is we all have to be very careful with what we choose to believe and not believe based on our cultural or historical moment. Be careful that you don't reject things in Christianity because you happen to be a Canadian or a Westerner living in 2021. That's a scary place to be, because as we've said here multiple times over multiple issues, if you jumped on a plane and went to a different country at a different time and asked them what they believe, I mean, you go to a village somewhere in the jungles of South America or Africa, and you ask them whether they have a problem with a God of judgment, they're going to say, I have a problem if God doesn't judge, because I never get my vengeance. I never see vengeance to the people who rape and murder and kill. And so be very careful to not read the cultural teleprompter so much so, as we say here often, that you start rejecting Christianity based on repulsions versus actual evidence and data. So what I mean by that is this. There are times in life where sometimes things don't feel right or feel good, but they're actually right. And what I mean is this, I've had to fire people from Village Church before. It's never a fun thing to fire anybody. It never feels good, but it doesn't mean it's not the right move, right? I've fired people multiple times. I remember the first time I ever had to fire someone, they were crying. And I just wanted to give them their job back and give them a raise because I have a heart. Okay, I was just playing here. You're now the lead pastor, whatever. Like, that's what I wanted to do, but that would be the wrong move. And then on the flip side, there's some things that feel really good, but they're not the right thing. The founder of adultery.com says that it's very pleasurable for a short time to cheat on your spouse. It doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. Be very careful not to follow what feels good or doesn't feel good in a particular moment to build your entire theology. Jesus transcends that and he says, no, there's actually a condemnation that is against us, whether we like it or not, that we need to be saved from. Okay, here's a second pushback that skeptics have in the Western world, that hell or condemnation is unjust. It's not right of God to judge. And that, again, is because we live in a particular culture where we don't see the murder and the rape and the disgusting realities of the world right in front of us that demand a kind of vengeance. We demand prison for all these people. We don't live in the throes of saying, you know what? I never see justice, and I want Romans 12 to be true, that vengeance is God's and he's going to mete it out perfectly. That's what I want. So Miroslav Volf, who's a philosopher and was in Croatia during the war and saw many terrible atrocities, he says these words. He says, it takes the quiet of a suburban home for the birth of the thesis or the idea of God's refusal to judge. In a scorched land soaked in the blood of the innocent, that idea will invariably die. And as one watched it die, one will do well to reflect about many other pleasant captivities of the liberal mind. Why would you worship a God who fails to uphold justice by punishing evil? That's the question. That's what he's going to do. And it's not unjust because there's something built within each and every one of us that demands justice. It's part of our soul. It's part of our DNA. That's why people throw paint on people that are walking around with, big animal furs, and they throw paint on them and they cry out for the injustices of the large corporations that are putting people in slavery and making money. And we say, we demand justice. That's because God's a God of justice. And our sin needs to be actually judged either on the person or work of Jesus or we get it. That's the biblical view. The third pushback is that hell is overkill. People go, well, the Bible, and we could hit a bunch of passages, but the Bible talks about condemnation or hell as eternal, and somebody only lives 80 years or 50 years. How is that legitimate? And what we fail to understand there is that even in human law, we don't tend to punish people based on how long it took to commit a crime, right? It took 10 minutes to murder those 5 people. We don't put somebody in jail for 10 minutes. We put them in jail for the rest of their life or even take their life. Because the question is, did you violate a particular essence in a person that demanded that you be punished to the highest extent of the law? That's the point, is if you kill, now think about this. Philosophers talk about how there's this scale of essence within creatures. Think about you and I. Okay, I'll give you an example. So my family and I have owned a series of different animals in our life, right? So we owned some birds at one point. We owned one of those robo things that just motor around the house and you lose them. We owned 3 chickens at one point. Listen, we owned chickens a few years ago, and one day we put them outside because I had to be outside for the night, and we came down, and no joke, it was CSI down there, okay? It was an absolute murder scene. There was a massacre. Raccoons had come up on our porch and just slaughtered all 3 of these chickens. Their heads were off, bodies everywhere, big clog, just blood. We had to shut the blinds for 2 days we couldn't look at it, all right? And our kids would come, where's our chickens? It was like, nothing, no, McDonald's, everyone. All right, we just couldn't deal with the fact that there was murdered chickens all over our place. And then like a couple days later, our kids had birds, and we walked up to the room, and both of the birds, and I've told this story before, both of the birds had died in the cage on the same moment, on the same day. We don't know if it was a murder-suicide. We don't know kind of what happened in this scenario. All right, it was like I spent, 2 hours in there trying to figure out the sunlight, the water, everything about how did these 2 birds die within 8 hours of us seeing them, and then death. Robo thing died. We've killed so many animals, it's mind-boggling, all right? Then we got our dog. Now, here's the thing. We got little Kenzie now, okay? Got her in 2017. She's like the prime creature of our whole family. She's what we're all about. So we all sit, chickens died, robo, birds. Imagine I said, and you know what? The other day, it was crazy. I just hacked my dog and it's dead now. And we'd all go, what? Remember last week I told a story about killing a spider? I'm sure all of you, spider. Imagine I said, oh yeah, I took a shoe and it killed my dog. You'd all start writing letters and you'd call somebody, because to kill a dog is different than killing a spider. Than for some chickens or some birds or some robo. Why? Because there's a scale of importance and essence where humankind, it actually peaks, where we can kill sharks and birds and cows by the millions because we need burgers. We need steak, right? I mean, what are we going to do? Say, oh, no, we're saying. But you kill a human and all of a sudden you've done something wrong. Why? Because there's an essence. Now, when it comes to God, when we sin against him, it's the ultimate violation of a perfect, infinite essence and person, that the implication and punishment, if I kill a human being, I go away for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. I sin against God repeatedly every day. There is condemnation. That's the just result. That's the point. And here's the thing. I run away from him for my 85 years. It's an infinite sin. And by the way, we do right now, you choose to run away from him. So if your plea on the day of judgment was going to be, I didn't know, then now it's too late because you've watched this sermon and you know. We choose it. D.A. Carson, who's a New Testament scholar, he says it poignantly. He says this: hell is not a place where people are consigned because they were pretty good people who didn't believe the right stuff for their 80 years. They're consigned there first and foremost because they defy their maker and want to be at the center of the universe. Hell is not filled with people who've already repented, only God isn't gentle enough or good enough to let them out. It's filled with people who for all eternity still want to be the center of the universe. So what is God to do? If he says it doesn't matter to him, then God is no longer a God to be admired. For him to act in any other way in the face of such blatant defiance would be to reduce God himself. And then there's people who say, well, it's not right for this condemnation to play out the same for Hitler as it is for the regular Joe. True. Which is why the Bible actually says that every piece of the condemnation is going to mete out perfectly according to the perfect justice of a perfect God based on our life. Jesus teaches this. Listen to Matthew 11. He says, woe to Chorazin, woe to Bethsaida. I tell you, it will be, listen to this, more bearable on the day of judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You will be brought down to Hades. I tell you that it will be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom than for you. What he's trying to say is there is more bearable and less bearable. There are levels of this thing that are going to be exacted out perfectly. So you don't have a justice issue anymore. You don't get to put God on trial anymore. And then let's do one final pushback that skeptics have toward this idea of hell, that it's a torture chamber. That, you wouldn't put a fire against your worst enemy, so why would God do this forever? What we've got to understand is fire. Think of the images the Bible gives. Fire, utter darkness, weeping and gnashing of teeth. These are first century apocalyptic language images to make a theological point. These are the images that the Bible gives, metaphors of God's judgment. It was a common image of judgment to talk about fire. Symbolically, here's what God does. So one scholar, N.T. Wright, says this: the different layers of meaning in vision literature of this type demand to be heard in their fullness, not flattened out into a single level of meaning. If this had been noted a century ago, biblical scholars could have been spared many false trials. Apocalyptic language uses complex and highly colored metaphors in order to describe one event in terms of another. Indeed, it is not easy to see what better language system could have been chosen. The metaphorical language of apocalyptic invests history with theological meaning. What he's trying to say is the fire, the utter darkness, these are metaphors and images of God's judgment. They're not meant to be taken literally. It's like me reading my kids Lord of the Rings at night, and I'm like, the Nazgul are, slaying everybody, and they're like, are the Nazgul real, Daddy? I'm like, night child. All right, it's like, no, this is fantasy literature, but does that mean it doesn't mean anything? No. It means whatever fire symbolizes, which is why I'm looking at you and pleading with you that you can toss Christianity if you want. You can deconvert and deconstruct and reject. I'm just telling you, this is what's real. And whatever the images mean, they're not good. They're awful. They're relational, psychological, emotional, spiritual suffering. And Revelation tells us that they go on forever. The book of Hebrews says God is a consuming fire. There will be a judgment for people who reject the Son. And it will go on forever. And I don't want anybody watching this video right now or listening to my voice right now to experience it. So C.S. Lewis, on his essay on hell, in one of his chapters in Mere Christianity, he says this: there is no other way to the happiness for which you were made. Good things as well as bad are caught by a kind of infection. If you want to grow warm, you must stand near the fire. If you want to be wet, you must get into the water. If you want joy, power, peace, eternal life, you must get close to or even into the thing that has them. This is my plea with you. They're not a sort of prize which God just hands out to anyone. They are a great fountain of energy and beauty spurting up at the very center of reality. And if you're close to it, the spray will wet you. If you're not, you'll remain dry. Once a man is united to God, how could he not live forever? Once a man is separated from God, though, what can he do but wither and die? To wither and die in the soul is the state of the condemnation. But let's not end on that. Here's what he says. There's another option. And the other option is to be saved, to be not condemned. That's the picture. To be what the Greek definition is: to save, to keep safe and sound, to rescue from danger or destruction, to heal, to preserve, to save, to do well, to make whole. That's what save means. And what's actually happening when we're saved? Verse 19, this is the judgment. The light has come into the world, and people have loved the darkness rather than the light. What is actually happening? We're coming to the light. When people are saved, when they come into a relationship with God through the person and work of Jesus, it's not that they're becoming, when people don't believe, it's not that they're dumb. The Bible says it's not because they're not smart enough, it's because they can't see. Listen to me, this is Paul, 2 Corinthians chapter 4. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. We're blinded. We can't see. We're in the dark. And he says, when people haven't believed in the Son, they've loved the darkness, and their works are evil. Now, here's the problem. Some of you are like, man, what a jerk thing to say. Evil, darkness. How mean is that? Listen, evil doesn't feel like evil, guys. Doesn't feel like what you think. This is why when the Bible talks about evil, it lists stuff that you, as most of you watching this, are like these just domesticated Western people, right? In Vancouver, there's a street of drug addicts called East Hastings, and it's just 2 blocks of people strung out. It's graffiti. It's exactly what you would look at and go, my gosh, this is problematic. You know what he's saying here, man? You don't feel, just because you haven't believed it, you don't feel evil. What do you mean evil? I don't do bad things. I'm not living in the dark. But you know what the thing the Bible says? Evil ain't like East Hastings in the sense of what you think when you drive by and you go, I want to cover, this looks like this. It's Robson Street too. And Robson Street, for those of you who've never been to Vancouver, it's the flashy, it's the beautiful, it's Fifth Ave in Manhattan. It's the shopping district, and it's the materialism that's just as demonic. than the other version that is clearly feels and looks like something. See, some of you, you're in this state of darkness and evil, but it doesn't feel that way, so you've been duped because you're blind. That's what he's saying. And the scary thing is, guys, I'm pleading with you, you don't know what you don't know. That's the problem. We're blind and we don't feel blind, so we think we're fine. Let me give you an illustration of this to close. My wife and I were away a couple years ago, and I told this story just when it happened. I don't think I've told it since. And we were having dinner. And we're having dinner at this nice place, and this couple that's sitting kind of a few feet away from us starts to talk to us. And we're in California, and I was speaking at a church, and they start to kind of talk us up, and we get jamming a little bit for 5 or 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, they propose to us. It ends up they're swingers. All right, I'll save you the details. The bottom line is they want to have a good time. And they're like, what's up? Let's go. Let's switch it up. Let's have some fun tonight. And Aaron and I were like, yeah, no, not going to happen. And here's the thing. We went home, we were talking about this as we drove. You know, that didn't they're nice looking people actually. And boy, it's nice to be kind of like hit on, you know? Once you're married, you don't tend to get hit on very often. So it's like, especially when you're with your spouse, maybe when you're not with them. But when you're with, it's kind of like, oh, that kind of felt, good. And it was kind of, and they were nice look. Like it was a nice package. Like it was nice. But as we got in the car and the further we drove away and the laughter started to go down, by the time we were at the hotel, we were like, there was something evil about that. There's something, guys, so messed up, so demonic behind this nice, flashy glam, guys. There's just as much evil than what's behind what looks rotten. And that's why we need the Bible to tell us, guys, when you don't, what's actually happening at the end of the day, when you don't believe in the Son of God, when the light has come into the world and people have loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil, doesn't mean they're out being Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin and killing tens of millions of people. The Bible doesn't define evil that way all the time. And it certainly doesn't feel or look evil to the regular eye. It's just how the Bible defines not believing in the only Son. And the result is condemnation. And so, honestly, Lord, I just pray that whatever distractions are going on right now, and I'm sure there's been some as people have gone through this service, as historically when I preach on this topic, tends to be the case of distraction. And if people have been distracted, that maybe they'll even go back and listen to this again, because you're trying, Holy Spirit, to pierce through the darkness and the confusion and the blindness. And sometimes we don't see it because we don't know what we don't know. Holy Spirit, do a miracle and bring life today to people. Let them believe in you. Let them raise their hand and commit their life to you in Jesus, and let them email us and tell us in the comments on Facebook or, on the church online program. Just tell us, I believe in Jesus. I want to come to know Jesus. I don't want to experience this condemnation, but not because I'm afraid, because that tends not to stick. It's because I love God. It's because I'm motivated away from my sin and toward the beauty and the goodness and the perfection of the work of Jesus Christ on my behalf. And let that change me to the core of my being. I just pray those miracles, those Lazarus is raising from the dead at whatever age stage. I don't care if they're 12 years old, they're watching this, or 95, whatever. People would come to know you, because we know time is short. We get one life. And then, as the book of Hebrews says, you live once and then judgment. in this moment. Do that work among us. Speak. Let us hear you. Blaze through the confusion, blaze through the distraction, blaze through the doubt, and let us just find ourselves believing and trusting in a way we never have before. Do that miraculous work among us, Jesus, we pray. In your good name, amen.